Let's Get To presents
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Here come the Astros, burning with desire. Here come the Astros, breathing orange fire. Here come the Astros, with winning on their mind. Here come the Astros, number one every time. Go, go, Astros. We want Houston! We want Houston! Alvarez hits a high drive, center field. Bierling's back! This game is turned upside down!
And the pitch is lifted to right by Castellanos. Long run for Tucker over toward the line and foul territory. Makes the catch, and the Houston Astros do it again. 2022 World Series champions.
And now, Go Astros. Astros baseball from three guys who've been there since Art Howe had hair.
Here come the Astros, breathing orange fire. Here come the Astros.
And welcome back to Go Astros. We're a little late because we had Memorial Day and then we had things and people on this Zoom call actually work. So if you would like to make us be more available for you to follow your everyday Astros needs, by all means, tell all of your friends that way we get paid for the show. But paying with their heart and soul, we've got Andy Tom Chesson coming to us from the Pack NW today, and Brian Arbor from back up in the Northeast. Gentlemen, how are we doing today?
We are 5:30 in the morning and it's 49 degrees.
Okay, Brian.
Exact same second, right?
So Andy's cold and it's early. Brian, are you cold and it's moderately early?
On Thursday, I turned in my grades, and I have, outside of going to commencement on Friday, no responsibilities for the next 3 months. Cheers.
So you have the warmth of teacher freedom. Okay, so we always talk about, it's Andy's mantra that we've adopted on the show, that we don't even care about things until Memorial Day. And so with that, we are past Memorial Day. The Astros sit 3 games behind the Texas Rangers. They are 10 games over 500. Andy, good news, bad news, where you thought they'd be?
I don't think anybody expected them to be trailing the Texas Rangers at this point. The Arlington Rangers, excuse me. I almost gave them respect that they don't still deserve. We're 10 games over. We're trailing somebody in June, but it's not that big a deal. And I kind of liken this race as it standings to this point. Let's put it this way. I still expect Seattle and Houston to be the 2 teams at the end of this whole thing. Everything that could possibly go right for the Rangers has gone right, with the exception of Jacob deGrom, which anybody could have told you was going to happen when they signed him. Almost everything that could have gone wrong for the Astros has gone wrong. You had a bunch of guys get off to historically slow starts. You lost 3 starting pitchers, even without choosing not to sign anybody in the offseason, which may be part of our discussion today. And they're still 10 games over, and they've played a fairly difficult schedule, although it has lightened up over the last couple of weeks because we've seen plenty of Oakland, which is the cure for all your ails. Oh, wait a minute. I don't want their fan base to feel bad, so I apologize.
Yeah, we're getting really thin-skinned out there, Brian. Okay, so for you, you had your Substack out there. You kind of broke down not where I think we thought the strength of the team would be in March, but overall, what are your impressions of where we are?
So the Astros have a run differential of plus 55. 1 year ago, after 54 games, we just finished 54 games, the Astros had a run differential of plus 48. They're 7 runs better this year by that metric than they were last year. Now, will they go on and continue to add to that at the same level? I don't expect them to win 106 games again, but the Rangers right now are on a pace to win 106 games. That's not going to continue. The Astros are on a pace right now to win 96. That seems a lot more sustainable with possible growth because you get Altuve back. You've got Altuve back, and so the offense probably won't be as bad as it's been, though, as I wrote yesterday, this really does seem to be a pitching first team. And that they lead the major leagues in lowest numbers of runs allowed. The Rangers, by the way, lead it in runs scored. So you have two very, very different styles of teams. This team will go as far as its pitching can take it. But as we saw last season, it can take it really far. And I think they're in a good position long term.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm actually happy with where the Astros are, because we all acknowledge that be about 500 when Altuve got back. And I'm not sure anybody really thought that Altuve would have the immediate impact that he's had. I mean, usually it takes a little while, but especially I think he got one hit in all of his rehab starts, and then he came out and he's just doing Altuve things. I know we don't care about lineups, but I like the lineup arrangement now with Abreu hitting a little farther back in the lineup. Brian, it seems to me that Abreu might be finding it a little bit. Is that me being overly positive as an Astros fan, or and loving the fact that he sprinted around the bases, or do you feel like what we're seeing is what we're going to get?
I mean, hey, the home run was awesome because of how he acted, sprinting around the bases, and because of how his teammates acted. And you get a sense of, he's as he was in Chicago, a beloved guy in the clubhouse. And they were certainly happy for him. The issue with Abreau is he's not hitting the ball hard enough. And there's little sign that, there may be sort of small signs of that, but it's not consistent. If you look at his numbers, he's hitting it a little bit of bad luck, but the bad news is it's just a little bit of bad luck. So he's got to significantly turn it around to be a contributing player. And the further he goes without doing that, the less likely it is he can't turn it around.
Andy, how about you? I mean, what do you feel like when you're watching him take at-bats? Because there was a time when he looked completely like going up to the plate, like, what's the point? I don't even know what the point is. And he'd swing 3 times and sit down.
I won't pretend to know a lot about Jose Abreu and his career at the White Sox other than the numbers, but it looks to me like you can very easily get him out by throwing inside fastballs or inside breaking balls and tie him up, because he can't get around on anything that's inside anymore. He's never been a real pull hitter from what I understand. So in the Astros media, the people that cover the Astros, and the fans included, we get into this thing about, as much as we realize that the Crawford boxes aren't that big an offensive help to anybody, we pretend every time we sign somebody or somebody's new to come into the club, oh, they're going to make big use of those Crawford boxes.
Right.
That's not his game, even though the one home run he's hit in Oakland this year was to left field. When I start seeing him go the other way with balls, whether they're singles, doubles, whatever, I don't really care. He's just not making enough contact, and not, to Brian's point, not enough hard contact to matter at this point. It's almost, and I know we love Yuli, and Yuli's great, but the last couple of years with Yuli, it's almost what kind of double play is he going to hit into this year? That's kind of where I am with Abreu, because he's had a lot of guys on base in front of him, and it's just, let's just get through his at bat without him doing too much damage. And that's a hard place for him to be as a veteran, because they have the analytics. They see what we see. They see more than we see. At some point, I think when we're talking about analyzing things through this first quarter of the season, quarter plus, you've got to solve Jose Abreu question, or the first base question. And that's going to be on Dana Brown, because at some point we get into an actual pennant race. We're not quite there yet. And then it's going to be a lot of, we appreciate your feelings, we appreciate you're a good guy, but we've got to have production, especially at a position that's not really a defensive premium. It's hard to win games unless you're Mark Grace with a first baseman who just doesn't hit for power.
Well, it does seem like every time we turn around, whether it's Michael Brantley or Yanni or Diaz, somebody else is taking ground balls at first base.
Mauricio Dubon's the latest.
Dubon being the latest. And so I guess, Andy, then, is he the starting first baseman for the Astros after the All-Star break, after the trade deadline, excuse me?
I mean, I see a world where potentially not. The problem, as I'm sure we will discuss ad nauseum, the Astros just don't have a lot of pieces to give without breaking up some of what they have at the major league level. There aren't, in my mind, Drew Gilbert should be untouchable except for the upper echelon of a couple of players, which we're not going to be in the market for. There's a couple of other outfielders in AA right now that probably are similar to that profile for the Astros because we don't have a lot of prospects, period. So it becomes this issue of we don't have a lot to give, so we're going to have to get creative about how we create offense in the aggregate, whether that is a mixture of guys that we have on our roster or on our 40-man or going outside the organization. As much as pitching is a strength, I still think another starting pitcher is going to be a priority too. And so then it gets to the point of I'm picking up a starting pitcher. I've got to give up X amount of assets. How am I also going to get a first baseman who's worth anything? Now, good news, bad news, Abreu hasn't done much, so improving on that position shouldn't be that hard. I say that knowing full Astros have no solutions in the minor leagues for somebody who might do better.
Yeah,
So
unless
it's
we start
tough.
thinking
I mean, I don't know
about
if there's a good answer, but I see a world where Abreu's riding the bench being a good captain.
Brian. How about you?
Yeah, the one thing they can do is get a player you can get a player like they did last year who are about to become free agents as a rental, and they could look into a left-handed outfielder first base type, like Will Myers of the Reds is someone who is in my head, someone like that. And the Reds are going to bring up a bunch of prospects. They're already starting to. We're going to bring up a bunch of prospects this year. And that could be a temporary sort of platoon situation that could help in either first base or left field if Michael Brantley is basically down for the season, which is, again, as we talked about last week, part of the evaluation the Astros have to make thinking about the trade deadline is not just about baseball, but about health. Will Lance McCullers come back and will Michael Brantley come back? And they could be pessimistic about both of those, and that may necessitate, well, if McCullers can't come back, that really ratchets up starting pitching as a priority, because at the moment, I guess Jose Urquidy, assuming he comes back healthy, would be your fourth starter, but you'd like to find someone better than that to throw in the playoffs. If Hunter Brown's your fourth starter, they may not find anyone out there who is available, who is better than that, and they could prioritize, therefore, adding a bat. And so that's, to me, the ideal scenario is that McCullers eventually gets back and you can get enough time to stretch him out to be a starter in the playoffs. Will that happen? I don't know. He suffered another not a setback this week, so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, it looks like he's back to throwing on flat ground. If we're doing the whole angle watch 2023, he's back down to 180, I guess, flat.
Well, it's a pizza box, and they just moved the lid just a little bit, and now they're moving it back down. Yeah, so it's on a hinge, and they have a little compass, and they know exactly what angle he's throwing at. That information is just internal, though. They don't give that out to the press.
Not everybody gets that.
Well, one worrying sign: Lance McCullers did not speak to the press yesterday.
Yeah, and we
did he speak to Michael Schwab through coded tweets, though?
Quite possibly so. He didn't want to talk. He didn't want to talk to Chandler, according to a team spokesperson, and that's a different thing.
Does
it definitely seems like we are going to be on it definitely seems like Lance is probably not coming back, and I don't know that we are going to be on Michael Brantley watch, really.
Well, I think that's realistic. I think that's if the Astros made a mistake last year, and it's hard to say that you make a mistake when you win a World Series, but process over product, right?
Right.
Counting on Michael Brantley to come back when it was pretty clear that he wasn't coming back last year made things a little bit more difficult than they needed to be. Yes, the Astros overcame it. They were a very good pitching team. You could overcome that little bit of offense that wasn't there anymore. I don't think that Dana Brown can afford to wait on Michael Brantley indefinitely this year again. I don't think they can afford to indefinitely wait on Lance McCullers Jr. again.
I'll try.
And that's kind of they're in limbo a little bit because these guys tie up part of the payroll. They tie up roster spots on the 40-man, although I don't know if Brantley's probably on the 60. I guess I don't keep.
They haven't actually said whether he's been moved to the 60-day DL. I don't think he has.
They haven't even moved Luis Garcia to the 60-day.
Well, and that's just a when they need to do it, they'll do it
Yeah,
kind
they
of
would.
thing.
Yeah,
But I mean, I think you have to assume the Astros are going to continue to play well, but they're going to continue to need to be very creative around the trade deadline. And there's going to be some guys that our fan base has gotten a little bit attached to that are probably going to be elsewhere if you really need to solve those two questions, because a frontline starter or even a fourth starter isn't cheap when the trade deadline comes around. I don't love the idea that our broadcast team, Callis and where they were talking about Ronel Blanco being stretched out again, potentially make a start during the 17 game stretch. I've seen Ronel Blanco. I've seen the sequel to Ronel Blanco. I didn't enjoy either of them, frankly. And the third in a trilogy is never the best movie. So I'm not, I that doesn't make me feel great. And then you've got the Forest News again this year, who I guess he rooms. Does he have a house with Lance McCullers Jr.? Should someone be looking at putting padding around the coffee table corners?
Should we?
So when they toddle around, they don't hurt themselves?
Forrest Whitley has actually rooms with Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, and Chupacabra. And
That's
four
good.
people were not
Chupacabra
sure
has got a great.
that's four creatures we're not sure exist.
Chupacabra has got a great breaking ball though, so I look forward to him someday.
Yeah, but he's really bad for the clubhouse.
Damn bloodsuckers.
It's true. Yeah, I mean, I'm honestly beginning to wonder. And again, I think we have a reasonable approach to these things. I don't think signing Abreu was a mistake. It might have been a signing that doesn't work out. I don't think waiting on Brantley was a mistake, but I have a feeling I actually am in the in the place where I think we might have seen the last of him, period.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my idea was this contract for 1 year was his farewell tour,
Yeah.
and not that he's a guy that's going to get Miguel Cabrera treatment. Great guy, great MLB player, great clubhouse guy, but this was kind of his last hurrah. Age and injury were just going to make that happen. You certainly, if we're having the same conversation next year about Michael Brantley, something's gone horribly wrong in the front office. I might buy it. I might buy into the Bagwell fears if we're still talking about Michael.
The other thing to note about left field is there weren't a lot of great options in reasonable contracts. I mean, you could have signed Brandon Nimmo, but he signed for 8 years, 160. You could have signed Andrew Benintendi, but he signed for 5 years at 15. I mean, the yearly's kind of reasonable, but do you really want Andrew? You want Benintendi at 34? Apparently, the White Sox do. So there were a bunch of, flawed players, Mitch Haniger, Michael Conforto, Michael Brantley. None of them have done well. I guess Haniger and Conforto have played. So in that sense, they produce more value than Michael Brantley, but really look at the numbers, not that much.
Yeah. And I think it's similar to the Abreu thing, right? Like people can criticize the Abreu contract, but he was offered as many years and more money by other clubs. Like that's what happens. And if you're going to be active in free agency and that's going to have to become the direction the Astros take in the future, because the farm system is what it is. Speaking of that same farm system though, Brian, I mean, honestly, Bielak and JP France have more than gotten the job done. Astros Twitter will blame Bielak for losing a game, or JP France for losing a game in which he only gives up 3 runs across 5 innings and the team scores nothing. But you have to be at least happy with what those two guys have done, keeping the ship afloat when it comes to their turn in the rotation.
Absolutely. And I think one thing to note about both of them is they're not getting pulled early. They're getting, they're not going to go 8 innings, but they're going both 5-6 innings each. They're taking respectable turns throughout the rotation. They're not putting a ton of pressure on the bullpen. And I want to give particular praise to Brandon Bielak for last night going 5 2/3, because the bullpen was really, because of the extra inning game, because they played so many close games over recent years, the bullpen was in not its best shape. Both Presley and Abreu were down last night, and it really would have been an issue had Bielak had to come out after like 3 innings and the bullpen had to cover 6 innings last night. So both of them look, if you look at their defense neutral stats, like their FIP or things like that, there's probably some regression coming. They're not striking enough guys out, and they're walking, they're giving up home runs and walking more guys than they should. But hey, it's your seventh and eighth starter, and they are giving you respectful, competitive, and helpful pitching, and we should see more of that. We're going to need more of it because it's going to be at least the All-Star break for Urquidy to come back. It's going to be until we don't know when, until Lance McCullers comes back, and it could be a while before there's a trade for another veteran.
Yeah, there's been some guys in AA, Andy, too, particularly at AA level, that are overplaying their projection. I should say that. So they might be able to find a guy here and there to spot start, particularly in this really long stretch. I think, Andy, this is the longest stretch without a break of the season. Is that correct?
Yes. I'm pretty sure that's right. Yeah, and that's where you're going to, I don't know if they're ready to put Spencer Arrighetti in front of major league hitters, but that might be a guy who gets a spot start out of necessity. More likely it's going to be some guy that I think, God, what was his name? I've lost his name. There's a guy at AAA who was potentially going to get called up, and then he got hurt again. And I can't, not Forrest Whitley.
Who's
Another guy. Anyway, yeah, but there were some contingency plans, and it cracks me up whenever I make the mistake of going on Astros Twitter during a France or Bielak start, and some guy has the revelation in their head that these guys just aren't major league pitchers. Well, they started off being the 8th and 9th options,
right,
for the Astros breaking spring training camp, and that's who they are. The fact that we are keeping the team in games, which is the actual job of a starting pitcher, is not, I don't want to say a minor miracle, but they're doing better than anybody could have hopefully expected, especially Bielak and his track record, and France, frankly, with his lack of a track record. He's a 28-year-old, for all intents and purposes, journeyman. His great story is that he was about to quit baseball, and his fiance at the time convinced him not to, and he stuck with it, and now he's a major league pitcher. It's a great story. If
not even his fiance, his girlfriend of 30 days.
Yeah, and if either one of them are making,
that doesn't bode well for the future of the relationship. Sorry,
she apparently said this is the conversation where it's either he's going to break up with me immediately or he's going to marry me.
Yeah.
And JP, you made the right choice on both ends.
Ultimatums sometimes work. But if either of them are making a playoff start, something's gone really, really wrong. Either we could not find a trade partner, which is difficult to believe, or Dana Brown's not the guy that we think he is, which is, hoping is not the case. Again, as we've said a couple of times, the team can't count on Lance McCullers Jr. coming back, so something's got to give. I would prefer not waiting until the trade deadline, but I know it's going to be somewhere, between All-Star break and the trade deadline that all the movement starts happening, unless something just falls into our laps. But that kind of deal is probably going to cost somebody that Astros fans are going to be really apoplectic about, whether it's the Jake Myers faction because we have 3 left fielders, or the Chas McCormick faction, or somebody else that we're not even thinking about. Yainer Diaz comes to mind because Dusty appears to not want to play him at all. I told Jim last night because he got his one at bat on Monday, so yeah. He's probably done until Saturday. We're in a weird limbo thing, and I don't think it's it's not a indication of a decrease in level of play or a bad organization. What you're seeing right now is the loss of 2 first-round draft picks and 2 second-round draft picks as part of the sign stealing scandal penalty, the penalty we didn't have as an organization. We don't have those 4 players or those 4 bodies in AA or AAA to be call-ups. And so we're relying on the Brandon Bielaks and JP Francis of the world. And to their credit, they're doing a great job right now. We're just going to need more as the competition stiffens up later this year, and especially when you get into October, because this is still an October baseball team. I'm not, any doom and gloom you might be hearing from me is not about anything other than it's going to be more of a grind than we as Astro fans have experienced in a while. and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe everybody takes off because Altuve has sprinkled his magic fairy dust or churro dust or whatever it is he has on the rest of the team, and they're all going to start hitting. And he's fixed Jose Abreu, and it's just a matter of time, and everybody's right. I think the reality is you've got Pena figuring out his sophomore year of baseball. You've got Alex Bregman, who is slower than he has been in a long time, and who has taken it's slower in a number of ways. Alvarez is in a little bit of a slump, and it becomes very noticeable when he's in a slump because the offense just grinds to a halt. Tucker is still streaky. You've got to have one more solid bat in that lineup to lengthen it. I don't know where that comes from right now, and that's part of the hesitation in my voice. This is still a playoff baseball team, and it's still a playoff baseball team that once you get in there have proven that they can do things in that environment. So well, I think it's all positive at this point. Just stupid Arlington's in the way.
Well, and we're going to get positive in a second. I will say this, though. One of the things that we probably could have seen coming is the reactive part of Astros Twitter by the Astros not signing another starting pitcher in the offseason. When everybody had the Astros ranked as a top 2 or 3 starting rotation with a 6th starter in there. You cannot predict losing starting pitchers in consecutive days. You just can't predict that. So that's where we are. But look, the positivity part of Brian.
It's worth noting, it's not. They didn't have anything attractive to offer a free agent. If 3 guys goes down, we can pitch you. Well, 3 guys aren't going to go down, right? So why don't I take the job with the bad team who, I can beat those guys.
Yeah.
There's probably some creative trade they could have made for somebody, but not, sort of not really. And yeah, so it's, yes, they should have. But would any of them have performed better than Bielak in France right now? And my guess is no.
Right. I think Bielak in France, particularly Bielak, I think, is a regular member of the rotation on most other teams.
Yeah.
But the positivity, Andy, I'm sorry, did you want to?
I'm sorry. I apologize. I'm cutting out because I'm on wonderful hotel internet. But most of those complaints that I've seen that you're talking about how the Astros should have signed another starter in the offseason usually come back to Justin Verlander. And Justin Verlander hasn't been Justin Verlander this year for the Mets. He hasn't been healthy. And I think that if, we're an organization that wants to rely on advanced analytics, I think there were some things that were showing to the team at the end of last year, and especially through the playoffs, even with a short sample size, that told that team that he wasn't worth the $40 million plus that he was looking for. So it's a little bit of, a false narrative to say that Verlander, we should have signed him. We should have seen all this coming. You can't predict Luis Garcia, a healthy person in his 20s, blowing out their arm, because literally you could predict that for any pitcher and you'd be flip a coin because who knows?
Right.
Urquidy is going to come back around the All-Star break. Who knows how he's a guy that will eat innings during the regular season though. But to pretend that we should have signed, I've seen as many as, should have signed 2 or 3 if we knew this was going to happen. It's just, we like to make up things retrospectively and pretend that, the Astros have somehow wronged our fan base. Meanwhile, we're the best organization in baseball over the past 7 years.
Yeah. Well, speaking of positivity, Altuve's back, and I think his impact was felt immediately, not just productive wise, which I know is obviously the most important, but everybody seemed like they immediately were having a little bit more fun. The lineup already looked a little bit longer. Brian, were you shocked just at how quickly we saw the Jose Altuve effect on the ball club? I think they won 5 of his first starts, the first 5 of his starts. It was been pretty ridiculous.
Yeah. Jose Altuve is a good baseball player, and it is good to have good baseball players on your team. And I will make this controversial opinion. He's a better player to have at second base than Mauricio Dubon. The team got better. I'm bringing him.
Hot take.
Brian with the hot takes as the soulless guy here, who apparently doesn't care about the rest of the fan base and their takes. The rest of the team does seem to feed off his energy. It's one of the reasons why they put him in the leadoff spot. And again, it's both effective in terms of energy, and it's effective because he'll like hit grand slam home runs to bring you back from 4-1 deficits, which the bullpen held it on Monday.
Andy, what about you? I mean, I think you and I are a bit more into the whole non-trackable stat, I guess you could say, of being the locker room guy, being the spark, being the straw that stirs the drink, as they say. Were you surprised to immediately
he's
see?
in the front office, though? That's where he stirs the drink.
Right.
Well, first of all, Altuve is one of those tiny little straws that's actually a stir stick, but women seem to drink out of the clubs, which never fails to make me laugh because it's not a straw; it's a damn stir stick. Anyway, it's Jose Altuve will be, when he retires, depending on what part of this argument you want to have, either the greatest or second greatest Astro to ever play for the franchise. And for me, it's because he can be whatever the team needs him to be. If the team needs him to hit 300 plus, he's going to hit 300 plus. If the team needs him to hit 25 to 30 home runs, he's going to hit 25 to 30 home runs. And when he's really, really good, he does both. Right now, he's in one of those streaks that he's doing just about everything he can right on the field. And you need that guy, because I can tell you how I've watched the Astros for these first 2 months of the season prior to his return was, all right, Dubon's doing well, but let's say there's runners on bases. Dubon comes up. All I need Dubon to do is get that runner over one base. If he gets on or not, that's fine and great. He got a base hit to right field. Fantastic. It's a base hit. But it was just about shuffling the lineup long enough to get to Alvarez.
Yeah.
With Altuve in there, I don't worry as much about shuffling the lineup and continuing at bats just to get to Alvarez, because Altuve is just as capable in a different way of getting runs across the plate as Yordan Alvarez. And so that gives you two of those guys in the lineup that are consistent threats to make your offense good during an at-bat or during a half inning. I think the Astros need one more of those guys, but it's a different conversation. But he's brought that back to the top of the lineup, and he's solidified. If he's doing well and you put Jeremy Pena behind him, Jeremy Pena, for whatever reason, has that Derek Bell juice, who Derek Bell couldn't hit anywhere else in the lineup unless you put him at 2 between Biggio and Bagwell. Put him at 2 between Biggio and Bagwell, Derek Bell was an all-star. Jeremy Pena may be that guy, but he's only that guy if Altuve is batting leadoff. And so that just makes the first, now we're talking 1-2, Bregman starting to hit a little bit better. Alvarez, you can put Bregman between Alvarez and Tucker, although I still don't know why Dusty refuses or is hesitant to put Tucker and Alvarez together. That's a whole different thing. But now your first 4 or 5 people in the lineup are hitting and hitting sequentially, and it feels good. You're starting to get production from the bottom of the lineup as well in Chaz or Jake, whoever's in center field that night. Corey Julks is still living on borrowed time, but he's producing when he's in there, at least getting on base. And so you're lengthening that lineup. Abreau is the main hole, but Altuve is the guy that's making all that happen by his presence in the lineup. Nobody's afraid of Mauricio Dubon. And you can look at him. He looks like he's 12. Physically, nobody's afraid of him too, but nobody's afraid of him in a lineup. You're afraid of Altuve, and it alters the way teams approach the Astros when they're setting up rotations, they're setting up bullpen assignments. He just makes the team better by being on the field. And that's what we've seen record-wise and just level of play-wise since he's come back.
Yeah, and I keep looking at this lineup thinking if we can get some kind of regular, consistent production out of Abreu and basically settle on a left fielder, I mean, hoping it would be Brantley, all of a sudden that's a very deep and long lineup, which I think is what we expected coming into the season.
And I think we're 2 players away from being the best team in baseball. Unfortunately, I don't know that those 2 players are in Houston right now.
I'm not sure they have enough in the farm system to get them.
Right.
Puts them into a series of coin flips in the playoffs, but hey, the playoffs are always a series of coin flips.
Yeah, and I still think what Brian said earlier about they're going to be able to make deals, but they're going to be rentals because those tend to be shed payroll kind of moves, and the Astros have that going for them at least. They have plenty of room under the tax thingy, the salary
Threshold.
cap. That's not
Threshold. The tax threshold.
Tax threshold. I wish I could give the government, hey, you know what? It's the tax threshold. Well, that does wrap up this level of Go Astros. And I'll have the last closing thought. We all agreed, by the way, that Jose Altuve was everybody's player of the week. So what's the point? But, Brian, one of the things you said last year, and I didn't agree with you when you said it last year, was when the Astros win a lot of one games, you would say that was mostly luck. And I was always of the opinion that, yeah, but if a guy with a calm pulse in a 1-run game is going to create more luck than the team that's jumpy. However, I'd like to flip that because the Rangers are being lucky a lot, and I think the luck will run out. Go Astros. Brian.
I gotta top that.
Yeah, unfortunately, you have to top it.
Oh, okay. I thought that was, a good sentiment for all of us here. You may repeat the point I made earlier. The Astros are ahead on run differential this year than they were last year, which means they're going to win the World Series in 5. Go Astros.
I wish everybody a good baseball week unless your name is Anthony Bass. Go Astros.